Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks again for joining us on a Saturday at 4. Um, I hope that we can live up to that expectation of making this worth your time. But I'm really excited to begin this journey with all of you. And it's really nice to see some faces on my screen. And like Akhil said, if your bandwidth allows, please turn on your videos. Um, we will begin right away. This is a very short session, so I don't want to wait too much. I'm going to start sharing my screen. And once again, everybody, welcome and congratulations to the evidence learning community. Um, we are right now in our first meeting where we're calling it setting the stage, and I'll tell you a little bit about why we're calling it that. Before we begin, because this is a community, it is important that we get to know each other. So when this idea came of starting an evidence learning community, I started studying a little bit about what makes a learning community and how is it different from a session or a session plan. And I got to learn a lot about this whole process. So one thing that came out very distinctly is that it needs to have the sense of community. So this first session that we're doing today, I'm going to call it meeting actually. This first meeting we're doing today is to just get us started thinking about evidence. We already know that evidence is important. That's why we chose to spend our Saturdays doing this for the next couple of months. So we're not gonna go on preach about, okay, evidence is important, please improve evidence in your practice. We're not gonna do that. We're going to find out ways in which we can do that more. And to do that, I'd like us to get into the zone of thinking about evidence once again. Set aside this 1 hour, think about evidence. Get into get into that zone and talk to the peers in this community about why it's important to them, to get their perspective on it, which is the whole point of doing this learning community rather than like making a course out of it. And we're also learning. Akhil and I were working at CoLab, and our whole premise is improving evidence in education, but we're all still learning how to do this better. So we'll be getting to know each other a little bit, and we'll be engaging in a couple of activities that help us interact with each other and explore, um, some learning resources along together. Before we begin, like I said, this is a community. Please, let's begin by introducing ourselves. I'm going to share a link to a Padlet on the chat box. All you have to answer are the following questions, right? What are you currently doing? Where are you doing this at? Where are you based out of? Only if you're comfortable sharing. And if you'd like to meet up some members of this community in person, if they're in your city, and your email ID so people can reach out to you for collaboration if they want to and if they're interested in your work. I'm sure everybody likes that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and share a link to the Padlet with you.
Ria,
When you're done,
when are we coming back?
yeah, let's take a minute to do this. So I did not want to do too much, let's do this in 1 minute, let's do this in 5 minutes. We're all used to that because we're all from PFI. And it's great. But and I know like evidence and research and all of that sounds really serious, but I did not want to make this space narrative like that. So we're just going to take about a minute, no timers involved, to fill in our information. I trust we'll take the appropriate amount of time. And then once you're done, go ahead and look through other people's responses so you know who you're going to be interacting with for the next few weeks. So I'm going to tell us all a little bit about the different platforms we'll be using going forward. Um, Not just these 5 meetings, but also like other platforms. So I'll make this Padlet available on that platform. And then we have access to all of the contact information in case in future, we want to reach out to some of the people in this community. Yeah, feel free to keep entering more information and perusing through others. For now, we will begin. I will share my screen again. Yeah. Um, so before we go into what evidence is, just like a quick vision setting for this community, because we're meeting about 5 times, is to me, this is so that we know that we share a common interest in incorporating evidence in education. We had about 80 plus people, 88 people, I think, apply to this community, and want to learn together with a group about evidence, which was really interesting, exciting for both Akhil and I. But we decided to keep it limited in membership so that people could engage with each other. And from your responses on the form, with the forms that you used to apply, we know that you all have a common interest in incorporating evidence in education. Some of you also went ahead and expressed an interest in specific tools that you would like to learn more about. Some of you said we'd like to learn about sampling, how to do the best kind of sampling when we're doing a research project, versus you want to learn more about hypothesis testing. So while I appreciate all of those interests, I have some of them myself. But what we'll be doing in this learning community is finding ways to learn that instead of going deep into those topics ourselves. So that'll give us a starting point as to, okay, what is the skill you want to prioritize right now based on the work that you're doing? Where can you go? Is there a community member who knows how to do this, who can help you figure it out more in a practical sense, rather than knowledge from out of a book or a course? That might take some time for you to apply. So my vision for this community is that we have a common interest in this, and we will engage in collaborative learning activities to do this better at our work. So whatever it is you're doing, either you're leading an organization or leading fundraising efforts to get more funding in for your programs and tell people that your work is actually working, or you're designing programs to solve specific problems, whatever it is you do, what are those things that we can learn and bring that back to our work? So common theme of our discussions will be, okay, fine, we know we need to do this kind of research, but let's take a look at the different hindrances that we encounter while trying to do more research. Maybe the department that you're working with in education does not allow for that kind of a time frame for you to do that research. How can you navigate that? How can we collectively learn how to navigate such challenges and more? And we'll engage in material that we've curated for the past few months, and we'll bring them to the table and we'll learn about them together. That's basically the vision. Is there something that someone wants to add? I know that it's just me who's been speaking so far, but I promise it'll change a little bit. I'm just setting some context. Does anybody else want to say or give a few comments on what they are expecting out of this learning community, apart from what is on the screen? Yes, go for it, Soumya.
Yeah, so actually I'm working on a project at the moment which is based on evidence-based practices, and that led me to pursue a dissertation in the concept of evidence. So I'm working on that project right now. So one thing that I'm very, very curious about is how are different people perceiving the idea of evidence? What does evidence mean to each and every person in their work? So I think I'd really like to learn that from everybody else.
That's fantastic. I think one person I know already who's working on this is Akhil, but I am sure other people are as well. Yeah, Akhil, do you want to quickly jump in with what you're doing with respect?
Sure, yeah. So currently we at Colab are also working on a secondary research paper on what is evidence in education. Something that Ria and me and a few other folks at Colab also believe is evidence, let's say in any other field, is definitely available. Like let's say in the medical field, or let's say in the automotive field, we do clinical trials or crash tests so that the efficacy of a drug is there, or let's say even a safety test for the automobiles. But in education, it's seldom found, right? So even we are doing like a secondary research paper, plus we are getting some primary findings as well with our conversations with a lot of CSO partners, with an Indian context. I know even when we talk about evidence, even at the policy level, it does exist, let's say the NEP or something, but uh, when it comes to evidence informed or based practices, not so much. That's not reflecting. So that's what even we are working on. Ria, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Akhil. Anybody else? Anything else you're looking for from this community? Okay. If there's something else, please reach out. You have the WhatsApp group. But let me show you a couple of other platforms we'll be using apart from these meetings to engage with this. One is we have 5 meetings. If you're not familiar with the structure of what these 5 meetings will cover separately, I will go through it at the end of this meeting as well. But we basically need to engage with learning material. So today I've brought a paper for you that we're going to read together and dissect and understand our own perspectives on what is evidence. So this is so that we can delve into the why and what first before going into the how, which will be the rest of the meetings. And we will document our findings and reflection. So we're recording these meetings. Any of the documentation that all of our members do will be on a sheet. I'll share that with you. But apart from that, we will go through this meeting again and cull out certain things that are being missed and not being documented and keep a ready tab of it. So that if you, maybe not in the timeline of this community, but later want to refer to them again, you have it in one place. So we're going to do that. One more platform is a discussion forum. I'm going to be sending a link to join that discussion forum for all of you. It's on LinkedIn. I hope everybody is on LinkedIn, and if not, please reach out to me and we'll figure out a way for you to engage with it. But in the time between our meetings, we may engage with other relevant learning material. You might come across a paper or some interesting thing in a, speaker series that you found out about. Please feel free to use this discussion forum to post those findings and learnings. Ask other people to engage with them and give their feedback on what they think about it. We really need to think more about evidence before we can start working on it. Obviously, also parallelly work on it, but this will be a good place to exchange ideas. I'll share a link at the end. And in the end, you do have the WhatsApp group. So we're not going to be using the WhatsApp group so much for discussing things about evidence, more content, just for updates or deviations from schedule, if any. I hope not. But we do have a session where we have an external speaker coming in. So updates about that. And if you want to plug some of your stuff, like personal stuff that you're working on, that's not directly related to evidence, you could choose to use this group for that. But we don't want to delve too deep into evidence and value discussion on that. It should be more structured, so that's why it's going to be on. Some norms that I think we should set for these spaces. So for the 5 meetings, we'll make sure that we're on time, we're present, and we're open-minded. All of this is helpful. I don't need to go into details about why this is helpful, but just being present for this 1.5 hours will really enrich this experience for everybody present. For the discussion forum, just make sure to be respectful, stay on the topic, and engage with each other. This learning experience will really just bring out as much as you want to from it, kind of like a fellowship. So definitely engage. It'll be more fruitful for you, and reach out to people who you think are doing interesting work, who you'd like to collaborate with, not just on evidence, but other opportunities as well. So use this as a network opportunity, everyone. I'm so sorry about my voice. I've been trying to recover from this laryngitis thing for the last week. I'm just glad that I'm able to speak today. So if at any point I lose my voice or you're not able to understand what I'm saying, please just tell me. We'll have Akhil facilitate the rest of the session for you, not putting him on the spot. Okay, so let's begin. I really do want to hear voices from the group now, and I'm going to stop talking. So what we're going to delve into next is what is evidence and why is evidence necessary, right? How will we engage with this? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start these 10 breakout rooms. I'm not going to assign anybody to these breakout rooms. We're going to call this exercise 1, 2, 3. It's actually 30, 60, 90 if you're familiar with it. But if not, we're going to call it 1, 2, 3. So these 10 breakout rooms, we have 25 people, right? So join any breakout room. Just make sure the breakout room you're joining is either empty or has one more person in it. Okay. If it has 2 people, don't join it. For the first 1 minute, the breakout room is going to be open for a minute. You're going to discuss these 2 questions, right? What is evidence? Why is evidence necessary? So you each get about 30 seconds to share. Okay. Now, whatever you're sharing, make sure you have your notepad and your pen or whatever your note-taking device you're using. And you take notes of what you said and you take notes of what the other person said. Then we're going to come back to the main room and we're going to start these breakout rooms again, where again you will join a breakout room where either there's no one or there's just one more person, but it has to be different from the first breakout room, right? If in my first breakout room I was with Maitri, I'm going to join the other one with maybe with Amzad, okay? Not with Maitri again. And the point is, in those 2 minutes, you're going to be telling the other person your responses to the questions and the previous person that you heard from, their responses to the question. And they're going to be doing the same. And you'll get 2 minutes to do this. Okay? And then we come back to the main room again. And then we join another breakout room for 3 minutes where we do this with the third person. Okay, you'll get 3 minutes. You share your response and the 2 responses you've heard so far. And the other person does the same. So 6 responses, 3 minutes. Okay. 2 responses, 1 minute. 4 responses, 2 minutes. And 6 responses, 3 minutes. Okay. So I see a couple of smiles. Pavan, would you like to do a temp check with the rest of the room if they understood the instructions? And if someone has doubts, Pavan can address them. If you need help, please tag me. I'll jump.
Even I was doing the temp check with myself first, like was 2
Okay.
responses, 4 responses, 6 responses, and we have 3 minutes. I think once we get into it, we'll find our way.
Okay, cool. Anybody have any questions about what we're going to be doing? Please ask.
Is each of the breakout rooms only lasting for a minute, or is
Okay, 1 minute. The first breakout room will be 1 minute, Radhika.
okay?
Let's just do that first and then come back and then I'll repeat it for the other couple. How
Okay,
does that
cool. Yes, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to open 10 rooms. Make sure you're with someone. So if you're joining an empty room, if someone doesn't join, just look through the list of breakout rooms and see that, you know, maybe there's someone else who's alone and join them. Don't just keep waiting. Yes, Tiasha. Did I say your name right?
Perfectly. So if I happen to go into a room with 2 people before realizing, then I can come out and go to another room, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So I'm creating these 10 breakout rooms.
I have created. I can just open it, Ria.
Okay. Can you set it for 1.5 minutes? Just because this is the first one.
Sure.
Okay. Everyone have their notebooks and pens and whatever ready? Okay. Then Akhil, go ahead and begin. The questions are on this. Thanks, Akriti. That's the true definition of a learning community. Everyone's part of it, right? What is evidence? Why is evidence necessary? Akhil, you can begin the break.
Hey, okay.
Hi, Rohini. Hi, Rohini. Yeah, let's get started off.
Yeah, we have few minutes. So yeah, to start off the questions, right? What is evidence? In my current role, I work with TFI, Teach for India. Sorry for the acronym. Teach for India. I'm a tech consultant right now. So for me to understand how my students are sort of learning through technology, how is their reading comprehension or math increasing from point A to point B, that would be my evidence, and that's why
Okay. For me, what is evidence is now very similar.
not sure if I was audible.
Yeah, you were audible. Very similar thoughts. For me, also evidence. But why is evidence necessary is very simple for me that, we don't have any negative effects without doing enough research.
Okay. Is everyone back? I think everyone's back. Did everyone? Two? Oh my God, someone didn't start. Okay, it's okay. It's okay. We have 2 more breakout rooms. But yeah, what were a couple of challenges that you faced while you were doing it? Too less time, that I get. Anything else? Only one of you got to speak. Okay. Anything else?
Arya, I'm joining from my phone. So I'm not able to see the number of participants in a room before I go in. So it'll be great if you can assign me for the next one to a room where there's only one person.
Okay.
Thank
Akhil,
you.
could you help with that? Yeah, thanks, Padma, for
Sorry.
bringing this up. Yeah, Tiyasha, I'm so sorry. I was listening to you and you got cut off. I was really interested. Let's do this, right? For the next breakout room, pick a room where you haven't interacted with that person before and start explaining to them that same thing. Let's do this for 2 minutes now. You share your response, and if you got the chance to listen to someone else in your first room, share that as well. Be mindful of time this time, and the other person can also share their response and if they found something. Let's open this up for 3 minutes this time, okay? Right? Let's do 3.5 so people can just say things like
I've already started.
hi, hello.
You can join in.
Okay, all right.
Radhika, you must have got a prompt.
I have not.
Okay,
I've just
nevertheless, we can
joined room.
discuss. No
Okay,
problem. We can
sure,
discuss in the main room. Yeah,
sure.
go ahead.
Yeah, what I think evidence is, I think it's the result of, say, an impact study, or basically we're assessing something and then realizing, okay, does this work? Is this effective in reaching our outcomes? Right? So that's what evidence is, and why it's necessary is, yeah, to actually just test if our program has the intended effect, and then I think beyond that, if we're thinking in terms of, is this something, is this good, is this enough for us to be able to put our resources into, especially if we're building huge programs and if we're scaling, right? Is it worth our time, our effort, our resources, and is it actually having impact at this huge scale? And I think another major thing is it's also useful in sort of making our systems, processes, whatever, more efficient to have more impact as well. So yeah.
Got it. Maitri, do you wanna? Okay, I'm gonna go. For me, evidence is basically something like a result on very similar lines, uh, where I'm able to gauge like where we were and where we have reached and what is that gap that we kind of filled. And for me, why is evidence important? Definitely because we don't want to create any kind of negative effects. So without research is what I was thinking. Okay, everyone are back. Awesome. We were just discussing on the main room itself.
Was it just 2 people or were there many?
I think it was just the both of us. Akhil, you're on mute.
Yeah. Realized. Maitri was there, but I'm not sure. There must be some technical issue, but yeah.
Okay, all right. I hope people got to listen to at least one response from another person. If that's not the case, please raise your hand. All right. So we have our own opinion and we know of someone else's. Yes, Srinidhi.
I am so sorry for interrupting. We were
Please.
able to discuss only one question out of the 2. Is that okay?
Sure. In the next room, though, you can aim to do more, and we can extend the time to 5 minutes in the next room, just because I'd like for people to engage with more. But we're going to synthesize all of this, so don't worry too much. Try to stick to the time, but it's okay. It's supposed to be fun also. So what I've been doing is I've talked to 3 people, actually 2 people, but from them 3 people because of more opinions, and I've just been taking notes. So make sure you have, your running list of notes from what you're hearing other people say as well. The next room, let's again share what we've listened to so far for both the questions and our opinions with one more person. It should be new. And let's set this timer for 5 minutes now. Can you also make sure you're not assigning people rooms and they can pick?
Yeah, just give me a minute. Just figuring out.
If you have time at the end of this breakout room, definitely catch up with them and talk to them about like other stuff you want.
Hi, Akriti.
Hi. Hello.
Do you want to go ahead?
So yes, so I've just been able to share with one person, so I can just share theirs. So they shared that the evidences are proof points of actions. So evidences are something that, I mean, because we are working in the social sector, it's very hard to quantify. And so it helps to quantify certain, I mean, to a certain level. And I think very similar to that, I also shared that it's a lot of subjectivity in the social sector. So as much as we are able to have evidences over a period of time, I think we can actually then categorize it under certain kind of behaviors and then bring as much as objectivity as possible in the process. So I think, yeah, that's what I think these were the 2 things. I think what is evidence according to me is also certain kinds of behaviors which are happening over a period of time, which we can actually pull out as certain actions, and then have a record over over a period of time, so that it just doesn't become clouded by our own our own maybe perceptions, our own preferences. Yeah. I would want you to share, other we do not have time.
Yes. Thank you, Tasha. Tasha, if you want to go ahead, or I can go. Anything's fine.
Akhil, you can go.
Okay. So something that I heard from the 1 or 2 conversations that I had with other people is that, for them, evidence is like an impact study, also like an impact report, to a point of where they were like a baseline to an end line kind of thing, and what they try to achieve during a program or something like that. And for me personally, also what I feel is why is evidence important is most of the times CSOs, government officials, a lot of them just based on data, they do programs. Let's say if in Bihar, FLN is, foundational literacy and numeracy is a problem, then they want to do one FLN course or some kind of teacher training program. But they are not doing enough research to understand if it's an actual problem. It could just be like they have some abundant resources, but they don't know how to use it. So it can cause actual negative effects if we don't have enough research, if we don't look at like what are the evidences in a particular context, is it working or not? So for me, that is why evidence is really important. Taisha, we have 40 seconds. Can go and try to cover if anything.
Evidence is something that's factual, that's objective, but by in itself cannot probably give me all the answers, but multiple types of evidence can come together and help me triangulate and reach the answer, similar to Akhil, what you're saying, so that we're able to allot effectively resources. And also what I heard is to be able to, apply that effectively also in context and not just stay by itself. So yeah.
Awesome.
Hi everyone, welcome back.
I think I spent the first 2 minutes just going from room to room, finding a place.
Was that fun though?
It was pretty crazy.
I saw you. You kept coming to our room.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope this was fun. And I know it was a little chaotic, but it's okay, right? We're okay that this is chaotic learning. And I think one thing we really want to be comfortable with, especially in the space that we work in, is to be comfortable with chaos. What we're trying to learn is not really actually studied that much. So because it's so up in the air, right? So just giving you some context, I'm a chemist by training, and I was doing a PhD in chemistry. So I love research. I love doing research, but research in chemistry is very like defined. You know, you can control for factors and all of that. But research in social sciences is so much more difficult because there's so much you can't control. And I don't have to go on and on about this. I get a feeling that everyone's kind of familiar with how difficult it can be to bring evidence into a practice. So yeah, I think just like be more comfortable with chaos. But yeah, I just try to make like a forced connection here from breakout rooms and this, but I hope you get what I was trying to say. What I really hope though is everybody got to interact with at least two different opinions of what opinions or just ideas sharing of what evidence is and why it's necessary, right? I invite you all to now take a couple of minutes to synthesize all of your notes and come up with your final answer based on others' responses as well. You know, it might have shifted a little, it might have completely changed, or it might have stayed the same but added a little bit more value to how you were thinking of evidence. So I invite you all to document this on this sheet. You should be able to see this sheet. I've given everyone edit access. But there's only one tab on this sheet right now. It says, what is evidence and why is it necessary? I already see one person. So what you can do is check on a row that you want to write your response in, write your name, and then start articulating your responses to these two questions. What is evidence? Why is it necessary? And make sure you're incorporating your learnings from what other people said. Right? And while you're doing this, this will act as our running sheet. But while you're doing this, I invite 3 people who are interested in speaking as well to share their responses verbally while others are typing. Also make sure to document it on the sheet, but also share verbally. Yeah, so anyone interested can raise their hands and I'll call you out.
Would actually love to hear a few of your thoughts and voices as well.
I can go just because I'm in the middle of something to type. Okay, I'll try to club everything in as best way possible. So evidence is something that's factual, it's objective, but it can't stand alone and it can't just be by itself. And so it needs to be something that the data with evidence is put in application to be in a contextual manner, not haphazard or like not a correlation sort of a thing. And also that it helps us prove if we are moving in the right direction or help understand if what we're doing is working, not working. And then use that to also make it visible to a larger group as well. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, thanks for sharing, Tiyasha. Fantastic. Please definitely take a note of this as well. I think some of what you said was resonating in other responses I heard in my breakout rooms as well. Anybody else? Go ahead, Kavya.
Yeah, so in the breakout rooms, we discussed how evidence is sort of any logical reasoning to back something up. If you're trying to probe something, it provides like a logical reasoning to it. I got like really interesting answers for the second one, which is why evidence is important. So one of it is to prevent like a lot of errors and a lot of negative repercussions, and of course to just check whether something is going right or wrong. So if you know that after using evidence, you know that it's going right, then you can continue doing that work. But on the other hand, if you know that it's wrong, then you can put an end to it right there, so that there's no negative or like severe consequences to it. So those were yeah, really interesting responses I got.
Thanks, Kavya. Again, same. I think I heard a lot of this in my breakout rooms also. Anyone else? One last person.
I think something that I found interesting, I mean, yeah, is that that evidence is sort of necessary at, say, at the grassroots level and, say, for example, national level policies maybe, and everyone's answers were kind of very relevant to sort of the work that they are doing, and you could see how they perceived evidence based off of their own work and experiences, and all of that I could see how all their answers put together would like in the long run, so you could sort of connect it, put it into the system in some way. It made up. I'm not able to get my point across, but I hope you're sort of understanding what I mean. But yeah, I could see that it's there in like every step of the way it can be used. Yeah.
Wow. Thanks everyone for sharing. Could you give me a sense of how much more time you'd need to document your findings, everyone? I see everyone still typing. Some of us are done. Okay, let's take 30 more seconds to wrap this up. You can keep this sheet open and choose to also do this a little bit later. What we're going to do now is, so like Akhil said, we are also working on the secondary research article on what is evidence and why is it important? What are those elements that make up evidence, right? I'm going to show you a snippet from that paper right now. So feel free to, look at your screen also as you're typing your responses on the sheet. Right. So what is evidence is the definition that we came up with from secondary research was this, right? Everyone can see my screen. Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, thanks. Yeah, so evidence is basically defined as systemically generated, objective, and explicit information on the effectiveness of education processes. This is in the context of education. It encompasses a full spectrum of information, including scientific empirical studies, statewide assessments, school inspections, peer observations, student feedback, school subject-related journals. Evidence also helps understand whether and why things occur and lays the foundation for further course of action. Right? So although this is more structured in sentence format and it's more comprehensive, what I heard from the rest of the group was very similar. And it was important that we get on the same page about what evidence is before we start exploring how to incorporate more of it in our work. The answer to the second question, why it's necessary, we came up with 4 broad points. We're still elaborating on them from more research. But basically the 4 points are: A, to avoid cognitive bias and confirmation bias. I think multimodal teaching strategies in the classroom are going to be a hit. And it has worked in this one city in the Netherlands. And I think it should really, really happen in Bihar. It might actually work, but there might be a cognitive bias and a confirmation bias associated with the way I'm approaching this, right? So to avoid this, evidence helps. Second, there's accountability and transparency to the people that you're working for, your stakeholders, and the people who are funding your interventions, or just generally, the people who are working with you towards it. It makes sure that time and resources are going in places where, there's promise. It gives you predictable outcomes, not to mention helps you avoid some repercussions that might come by from your intervention that you might have not been able to account for in the beginning. And this as well I heard in a lot of my breakout rooms. And the last one, in addressing complex problems such as evidence can inform the indicators of success. It can also provide a pathway to identify the most optimal solution by weighing the pros and cons of each objective. Right? Sure, you were able to achieve your outcomes from your program, but is there a better, more efficient way of doing this? These were some of the few things that we're coming up with in secondary research. This is obviously not the end all be all of this, but I just wanted to share a snippet from what we're also finding in doing research apart from this learning community. When that paper is out, Akhil will make sure to post it on our discussion board. But now let's go ahead and read a little bit, right? So there's this paper that we came across while doing our secondary research. This paper is basically a lecture by this one person, David H. Hargreaves. He is talking about teaching as a research-based profession. What are the possibilities of it and the prospects? Right? This is from 1996. It's old, but I really think we should read through this paper this time. I'm going to invite a nice volunteer from our audience, from our list of community members, to volunteer to read this couple of paragraphs. There are 3 sections to this paper and we'll divide it amongst ourselves. And we'll read through it and present our findings to the rest of the group. Right? Like I said, we are going to engage with learning material on this. So this is the first one that we're engaging with. Can someone volunteer to read out the first couple of paragraphs?
I can do that. Next one.
Thanks, Pawan. Go for it.
Teaching is not at present a research-based profession. I have no doubt that if it were, teaching would be more effective and more satisfying. The goal of enhancing effectiveness and satisfaction can be achieved only by a combination of several means, of which an adequate research base is just one. It is, in my view, a singularly important one, which deserves to be given a priority. However, I shall argue in this lecture that providing that research base will require a radical change, both in the kind of research that is done and the way in which it is organized. To make my case, I look inside the profession and the research community to examine what we now do. But I shall also look at another profession to detect what lessons can be learned about creating a genuinely research-based profession. The 50 to 60 million, I don't know, it's pound, we spend annually on educational research is poor value for money in terms of improving the quality of education provided in schools. In fundamental respects, the teaching profession has, I believe, been inadequately served by us. It need not be so. If the defects in the way educational research is organized were remedied, research would play a more effective role in advancing the professional quality and standing of teachers. Left to ourselves, we educational researchers will not choose the necessary radical reforms. It needs others, including practicing teachers, to give the firm push to get researchers on the move.
Great. Thanks, Pawan. Thank you. So this paper is in 3 parts. Educational research in a comparative professional framework, diagnosing what went wrong, and the way forward that this person suggests. This is not the, the most recent, most cutting edge paper, but I felt like this would be ideal to start with. Okay? So how we'll be doing this is, like I said, 3 parts to the paper. I've divided all of us into 3 breakout rooms. This was assigned randomly. So I'll send a link to this paper and we can spend the next about 7 to 8 minutes reading through the section that we've been assigned, read through it, and then spend the rest of the time in the room, just a total of 15 minutes, to talk with each other and present the information that you've just gone through as a group in 3 to 4, maybe 5 bullet points, so that you can present it to the rest of the group. Right? So what you'll learn from this is mostly like 3 to 5 points at the end of your reading. You should be able to present that information to the rest of your group so they don't miss out on the rest of the sections. While you're doing this, make sure to assign 1 presenter from your group. Any questions before we start reading? Okay, everyone's getting it. Thank you. I'm also sharing a link to that same worksheet that we were working on to define evidence and why it's necessary. There you'll see 3 more active tabs. Each tab corresponds to one section of the paper. So whichever section you're reading, go to that tab and start taking notes. You can take notes individually also before convening together as a group and starting to discuss your main 3, 4, 5 bullet points. Right? That can be your sheet where you're documenting all of it, co-working on it before you present that information. You don't have to make like a PPT or whatever. But yeah, that's where you can work. Any questions before we begin? There'll be a total of 15 minutes. Yes, Shivani.
So if I've understood it correctly, the members of the group basically, each member of the group will be reading a separate section and then convening and discussing, right?
So there are 3 groups. One corresponding to the first section, the comparative professional framework section. Everybody on that group will be reading that section. And together, that's the only section they'll be reading. And then they'll come together and put down their main learnings into some succinct points that they can present to the main group after.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, should we begin? Great. Have fun reading, everyone.
Can I ask a question? Were we writing for the diagnosing what went wrong? Okay, I think I'm too sick to actually focus because I did the part 1.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm just too sick to focus.
Well, we definitely know that you love reading. Okay. Okay, let's get started off with Srinidhi, Kavya, Soumya, Maitri, if anyone wants to start us off with.
Yeah, I can go first. So I just identified like 4 buckets. The first one was how linear model is not really working because it's really simple. But then still a lot of researchers are subjecting themselves to one aspect of it, which they feel is dissemination is the right problem. But then on further research, they have sort of figured out that it's not dissemination, it's the funding or commissioning of research that is the actual problem. And the lack of involvement of users in the system is what is causing the entire educational research to go in the wrong way. So those are like the 4 different buckets that I was able to identify.
Okay, awesome. Srinidhi, Soumya, Maitri.
I had 4 points as well. The first one is that the fundamental belief that the existing research is good at all and that it's going to be transformational if and when implemented. Which again, to me, also feels a little similar to what someone said earlier about confirmation bias and just kind of being in your own echo chamber. But there's no evidence at all that when applied, this research is actually going to be helpful and bring big shifts in education settings. There's no guarantee or evidence to point that at all. And a lot of why this is happening is because of the peer review model. So everyone in this sort of echo chamber is deciding what is worthy of being researched, where money needs to go, and they basically call the shots. And what is missing is just the involvement of people, users and practitioners who are in education every day, who have their own sort of lived experiences, learnings and expertise. And that is now not captured in the research process right from the very beginning. So there's like a big gap between research and implementation and even just the quality of research that's coming out. Yeah.
So while I was reading it too, something that stood out also because I might be a little biased here because I'm writing the paper. So a lot of things from the paper also I'm trying to relate to. So one, definitely like the implementation to the actual research process, because right now dissemination has never been the problem, but it's always with what kind of research processes. So even I am very aligned to that. That is one point that I could see both Kavya and Soumya also aligning to. And And yeah, the other points definitely I agree with the both of them. Others can add too.
Yeah, I
Mm.
think agree with what everyone is sharing. I think additionally, just that bit of the research and how does it translate into practice or policy. So even if there are, I guess, findings that are disseminated, so it doesn't just end with the dissemination of the findings, but how do you actually use those findings to improve? So I felt like that was also something that was present somewhere in terms of not being able to kind of close that post dissemination. And even with the users bit, I think, and this is just from experience, like I think research tends to be looked at as a very academic kind of exercise. But I think like people who are in the classroom in the school are kind of doing it every day. Like they're solving problems, they're asking questions, they're trying to figure out why things are not happening. And that kind of action research is not something that's given that kind of value. So just how do you balance those more academic pursuits with also a lot of that practitioner lens, something.
So who are more? Yeah, go ahead, Ben. Sorry. Yeah.
I was just adding a thought related to this, like what went wrong. It's not from this, but like usually what happens in the research, because research is funded and set in a direction, and most researches are made or disseminated with the view of like what works, so that can actually garner the attention. But the counter research like gets like a back foot, and there is not enough counter research in the field. Like a lot of like there is not much research on what doesn't work actually, because most of the researchers when work, like out of 10 things that they actually research on, 8 things don't work but 2 works, and the only in the dissemination we all get to know about those 2 things. There is a lot of need for what doesn't work for people to know also. This research that we had been discussing about in some other group.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Most of the times, we document only the things that are working, and we don't talk about the challenges, the gaps, and everything. So it is very important to capture those also, so that futuristically speaking, it might work for some, it might not, based on the context, but it is still documented somewhere. So makes sense. Okay, on that note, I would love for one of you to take up the role of a presenter, and because we have discussed and largely we have come up with like a good 4 to 5 points. If somebody wants to take up, that would be lovely.
I can take it up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kavya. Thank you, team, for it was wonderful discussing these things.
Hi everyone, welcome back. We'll just wait for another 10 seconds for everyone to join. Okay. Any like thoughts on the paper itself, like whatever section of it you read? Anything you want to add to the chat box about your feedback for the paper? Not that we're going to relay that feedback to the author, just want to know how you felt the quality of the paper was, the learning material was. If you have anything to say about that, please use the chat box. Can I please invite someone from the first group who were talking about the educational research in a comparative professional framework section, the first section, to please present what they learned to the rest of the group.
Okay, I could go. So we spent quite a bit of time just reading, I think, so we didn't get a lot of time to hear everyone's thoughts. But yeah, I think first we sort of discussed how they're drawing parallels with medicine and education. And one of the things that someone pointed out is that both are people-centric professions. Um, so yeah, so that's like a huge parallel, and that is why sort of it's been used in the paper. But we also spoke about how there is a lack of evidence in education as compared to medicine, and there is a lack of access to quality evidence to teachers as well. Um, Another point was just how in medicine doctors have there's almost no difference between the researchers and the doctors who are actually performing practicing the medicine, because the ones who are finding new research are also sort of implementing it immediately. But in education we are sort of seeing that there's a gap between the researchers and the users, and that is sort of limiting them from from applying the research. And yeah, someone else pointed out was that it's interesting in how in medicine we speak about solving problems, but in education we speak about it as making a paradigm shift. So that was an interesting sentence. um, yeah, I think we were also discussing if in medicine everything is sort of cumulative. If you find existing research, you sort of add on to it, and it is cumulative, goes forward. But in education, a part of it also context also plays a huge role in education, and it varies. So that was something we were sort of discussing, but we didn't have a chance to sort of complete that. Um, yeah. Just checking if there is anything else. Please, anyone else from the group, please feel free to add if I missed any points. So yeah.
Thanks, Radhika. If anyone who's read this section still has points to add, feel free to keep adding more points from this section on this sheet itself, right? We'll move on and then we'll try to wrap this up. Anyone from group 2 diagnosing what went wrong?
Yeah, it was a really interesting bit of the paper. So we sort of identified 4 buckets of what went wrong. The first one is how a lot of researchers have sort of discarded the linear model, thinking that it's way too simplistic. So the linear model sort of tends to be like doing basic research to proceeding to doing applied research and then actually disseminating the information. So many of them have discarded it, saying that it's very simplistic, but some of them still stick to one aspect of it, which is the last part is that is disseminating the information. So a lot of researchers believe that the problem in educational research lies within that aspect. Some of them blame themselves for not disseminating it in the right way. Some of them blame the sponsors for not funding it. And some of them actually blame the teachers for not, for ignoring the research findings and sort of failing to act upon it. But then one interesting point that was raised was that the fundamental problem is in researchers actually believing that there exists a lot of quality research to be disseminated. So like 2 interesting questions that were raised were is there some proof to actually show the benefits of teachers moving away from X strategy to Y strategy? And the second question was, is there an effective method that has been designed to convince teachers actually to move from X strategy to Y strategy? So the sort of funding that exists in educational research is very self-validating. It's peer-reviewed, and the allocation is just based on what researchers believe is actually good for the field, and not the active involvement of users or practitioners who are actually in the system or experiencing the changes that researchers are bringing about. So that is definitely another lack of involvement of users was another problem. And the basic gap between research and implementation of it in the practice is another key core problem. And a very interesting point that was raised that was not in the paper was how a lot of research is done on what works and not what doesn't work. So that was very interesting as well. But that's sort of the summary of what diagnosing what went wrong. Anybody else from the group can add on to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kavya. Very interesting stuff. Anyone from the last group?
Yeah, I think we didn't get a chance to decide who would, present, but maybe I could start off and anyone else could add. So I think in the section regarding the way forward, there was a lot of emphasis on, strategizing the whole practice of educational research and setting up a committee or a forum where all the stakeholders of education, the policymakers, the practitioners, and the researchers could come to a common point and discuss or, create those opportunities where what is the research that's required as opposed to all of these functioning in silos. And there was also, with regards to strategizing, there was also a need for clearly establishing what is a short-term objective for research in education and a long-term objective. And I remember reading Akriti, if I'm not wrong, discussed about the comparison. I think it comes back to the comparison of the medical profession and education. Would you like to share about that, Akriti?
Yeah, I think what I could see was some sort of a mindset shift that's needed, because we've been seeing that doctors and teachers both uh, come from a field which is like shared earlier in the group, which is people centric, and that times keep changing, and many times we've seen that for doctors as well and for teachers as well, it's always their practices have always changed and negated the earlier ones. So I think that that sort of comparison was made to to address the mindsets of teachers as well, that these our practices should also be evidence based, which I'm also connecting this with how a lot of times we've seen in education that our education system hasn't changed much from the past. And even though a lot of things around us has changed, our education system remains the same classroom structure that we have until now. So yeah, I think that.
Great. Thank you everyone for sharing. So I've already read this paper, and it was really nice to see everyone sort of discuss their own points and bring them to the table, because you've added more value to what the paper was saying by giving your perspective of being practitioners, of being policymakers, researchers yourself, right? So it was excellent to hear from all of you. What I want to give a disclaimer about is I'm sorry that we couldn't get too much time to discuss and go back and forth on opinions on this paper. But I'm also okay with that in the first session. This paper kind of covers a lot of what we're going to cover more in depth over the next few sessions, right? So the meetings that we do going forward are going to be us quickly going through some basics, some frameworks, engaging with one learning resource. It could be a paper, it could be something else, it could be a combination of a couple of things, and then diving deep into it and then discussing, right? So a bulk of those sessions are going to be discussions. So I'm sorry that we didn't get too much time to do that today. This paper, I will post it on our discussion forum shortly. So you can engage with the whole paper if you found certain sections of this paper interesting and you'd like to dig deeper, read more. When you do read it again, if you do, make sure to take notes on these sheets itself. So it's not only adding to your base of knowledge, but also contributing to others when they look at this sheet again. One thing that I want us to do eventually is this thing called a congruence scan. Can you raise your hand and tell me if you've done this type of exercise before? Okay. So we're going to be doing this congruence scan next time. So what I encourage all of you to do is either engage with this paper or try to find other sources of information, learning materials towards evidence in education that can help you prepare for this exercise next time. Okay? This is not like me giving you post work. I understand everybody is busy, but whenever you do in your leisurely reading time, find resources that can help you prepare for this exercise. This is basically us understanding what we believe about evidence in education, which some of it we already did, right? So that can come from your response over there. How is this belief manifested in your program? This is an example, but how is this belief manifested in what you do currently? If you think evidence is important, is it actually important in what you're doing? Can you give us evidence to support that? Right? And it's not to prove to us as a community that you're doing evidence, but if not, what can we do to enhance that congruence between your belief and the reality? That's the whole point of this learning community, and we're going to be engaging in this exercise next time. Apart from engaging in our general agenda for next time, so at CoLab and from our secondary research also, we believe that evidence mostly consists of two components. One is research before you start an intervention, and one is research after you do an intervention, right? So next time we'll be getting ready for the show. The show here is an analogy for your program, your intervention. What kind of research and evidence collection is necessary before you start an intervention in education? And what do you do after? So that'll be session number 3. And then we get in an expert and we learn from them how they do this regularly, when the person we're calling, their whole life has been about evidence and how to incorporate that in education. So we can ask them our questions of what challenges they face, how they counter those. And then what's next? We culminate all of it. We talk about quality, we talk about validity of evidence, and how to make it regular practice, right? So just giving you an overall agenda. I think Akhil shared this with you over email also when he sent out like the notification that you're going to be a part of this community. And yeah, any questions before I send you the link to the discussion forum where I'll be posting this paper, the sheet that we've been working on, and where you're welcome to share your resources as well. Any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, quandaries, anything you'd like to share before we end this call? Dayan, just reading your comment on the chat box. That's how I felt as well. This is really old, and this is one of the first instances of someone talking about evidence in education. And that's why I thought this would be a good paper to bring up in our first call. We will engage in more relevant, more timely papers going forward, and definitely encourage you to look back at history and how the evidence narrative has transformed. And if you find something, share it on the discussion board. Yeah, any thoughts, anything you'd like to share? Any plans for Saturday you want to share with the rest of the group, I guess, before we end, so it's not just me talking?
No, this was great. Thanks, Riya and Akhil, for facilitating and bringing us all together. The moment I entered, I saw so many familiar faces. I'm like, oh, I have to reach out to A, B, and C, and everybody else. But yeah, thanks for bringing us together. This was great fun and looking forward.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Yasha. I actually don't have too many familiar faces here, so I would like to get in touch and meet up if possible as well. Thanks everyone. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. It was great.
We will share these links on the group as well for easier communication.
Great.
Great,
I'm looking
thank
forward
you.
to all of the discussions that are to follow. There's only 5 sessions, so we don't have too much time. But I'm also assuming that will lead to more rich discussions. Definitely click on this link that I've just shared on the chat box to join the discussion forum on LinkedIn. As soon as I receive the invite on or your request to join on LinkedIn, I'll approve it. Then you can start sharing whatever you're engaging with, any reading or videos. Okay. Thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend. I hope this was an exciting space. If you have feedback on the structure of the space, also feel free to reach out to me. My email is ria@mantraforchange.com. But I will see you in a couple of Saturdays.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Ria. Thank you, Akhil. It was a great discussion today.
Thank you. Bye.